Namaskar and welcome to yet another edition of Insight. I'm Charu Karthikeyan. In this edition, we shift focus to Iran and the new presidency there that is all set to take over. Hassan Rouhani has been elected the new president-elect of Iran when he takes over soon, when he assumes charge officially. There are several challenges at hand as far as Iran's economic hardship and also as far as Iran's difficult relationship with the West is concerned. So in this edition of Insight, over the course of the next 1 hour, we'll be talking about the various challenges that Hassan Rouhani will be facing essentially as a legacy that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has left behind. So all of that and much more in this edition of Insight. Joining me in the studio today, the fantastic panel of experts on Iran and the West Asian region. Joining us today in Insight is Ambassador Swachh Singh, former diplomat, who's also served in the Ministry of External Affairs Iran division and been involved with the India's foreign policy in the Gulf for a very long time. Ambassador Singh, thank you so much for coming here. Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, Dean with the Jinnah School of Global Affairs. Sreeram, thank you so much for coming here. And Dr. Zakir Hussain, Research Fellow with the Indian Council of World Affairs. Thank you, Zakir, for coming here.
Address the economic situation. He has inherited a very difficult economic situation as a result of the sanctions. Several institutions are not functioning the way they should. And as you said, part of this is the former regime's legacy. President Ahmadinejad had a style which was somewhat abrasive. He was strident. His vision for Iran was somewhat limited. Yeah. And I think the fact that he got elected, Dr. Rouhani got elected, it's open support of Rafsanjani as well as Khatami as an indication of the kind of broad support he comes with. Right. So we'll have to see which way he goes. He is not an anti-establishment person. He is very much an establishment person. Okay. He's also a person with a deep sense of history and a vision for the future of Iran. So I think it's positive. It's a good development. Okay. But some of his options are limited. Okay. So we'll have to see. He has been a nuclear negotiator, so hopefully he'll be able to make some contribution there.
He knows the subject, he knows that
But
area.
It's a very difficult neighborhood. Okay. He has problems in Iraq, in Syria. He has serious issues about the amount of oil they've been able to export, the effect of sanctions. Now there are developments in Turkey. So Rouhani inherits.
He has the best credentials, which is probably why the electorate supported him in such a massive way. Sreeram, out of the over 36 lakh votes polled, Rouhani got more than 18 lakh, and which is a far cry as far as even his nearest rival is concerned. His nearest rival, I believe, got just 6 or a little less than even 7 lakh votes. What is this big support from the electorate for Rouhani? What does that mean for his presidency that is almost set to begin?
Well, it's clearly hope and degree of optimism that's reflected in this, because people wanted change. But it was so circumscribed and limited by the Ayatollahs that eventually they ended up, with just 8 candidates, out of which 2 sat down for consolidation. So the Rouhani by default became the choice of everybody, the majority of Iranians who want a moderate course. Yeah. Although he himself is an establishment figure, as the ambassador just mentioned. And, it's an oxymoron because some people call him a moderate conservative, which is a problematic phrase. But in any case, what the people have is hardly any option or hardly any choice. So they went for what we normally call the lesser evil. Jalili and the others would have continued the Ahmadinejad line, which is not only. I don't think anyone's going to miss Ahmadinejad because. One, there was massive economic mismanagement, the subsidies, and complete. In spite of the Western sanctions, what they were doing was they were putting up this pretense about Western sanctions being the cause for all the hardships. Okay. It was, of course, partly responsible, but there was also basic macroeconomic mismanagement. So Rouhani will people expect that Rouhani will do better on that count. Okay. And that's somewhat less controversial than the more political issues. But people also voted for Rouhani hoping that the reformists, Rouhani is more of a moderate, not really a reformist, and that the reformists who are in jail since the 2009 elections, who have been shut down and who have been barricaded and who have been repressed, will be freed. So there is a lot of expression. He did give some hope for them by saying that civil society must play a larger role in the public life and so on. Women must be equal to men, those sort of things. I think that's the liberal vision of the reformists, which to an extent Rouhani as an opportunist gathered towards the end in order to win. But now it's up to, and one of the big hurdles that he's going to face is he has to form his cabinet with the approval of the Majlis, which is the parliament. And the Majlis is packed with arch conservatives. So it's like 57% of the Majlis is conservative, around 30% are the reformists, and the rest are so-called independents. So the Majlis is one way, the judiciary, again, really pro-hardline. So he's going to, his own cabinet, you will see, is not actually going to be a reformist cabinet like that of Mohammad Khatami of the late 90s or the early 2000s. So it's going to be much more compromised. But in a way, it's also good because that means that the tussle with the religious side of the establishment will not be as marked as it was during Khatami's time. When Khatami's time, he was saying people should have the right to criticize the leader, even the supreme leader, who is not divine but human. I don't think Rouhani has the guts, or even if you look at his background, he's not going to rock the boat or try to rock it. So what he's going to do is take along. So in a way, maybe consensus is good, but from the point of view of the reformists as well as the liberal population of Iran, they can only get as much from this presidency.
Okay. Your take on the scope for improvement, or are the areas for improving ties with the West?
I am always reminded of Mahmoud Mamdani's famous book, Good Muslims, Bad Muslims. You're good if you're compliant, and you're bad if you resist. That's the yardstick the West has always used, the Americans especially, and the British. So Iran falls in the bad Muslim category because of its ideology of resistance. So whether it's conservative, moderate, reformist, whatever the domestic configuration is, the foreign, when it comes to, because it is tied to the identity of this Islamic Republic and the revolution of 1979, because they had overthrown what was a puppet regime of the Shah. So any kind of compromise when it comes to being somehow subservient or kowtowing to the West is just not acceptable. If you go back further in time, go back to the Safavids, go back to the Persian Empire, it's about, a sense of pride, about being different and distinct from the Arabs, distinct from the Turks, who are, of course, the former Ottoman Empire, and about Persia being a fount of civilization in its own right and deserving the kind of respect that the West doesn't give it. So there's no way, Rouhani or anybody is going to give up that agenda and somehow pander to the West. So that's not on the cards. So what is on the cards is some kind of quid pro quo. And here, I hope that, the Syrian mess, definitely, there's no way, for example, the West can get some kind of its way in Syria without Iranian cooperation. Same thing with the Taliban situation in Afghanistan after the West withdraws its combat mode. Again, it will need Iranian cooperation. So this is where, hopefully, in bargaining, you often have these so-called side payments, right? So the main issue may be so-called nuclear dispute between the two, but then there are other areas. In fact, Iran has been a votary for discussing all these. They want a comprehensive kind of, discussion where there are chips that it holds. But when they say, just stop enrichment and shut down and open your plants for inspection, that's when they see this as a kind of browbeating. And this is what they feel they have come out of since 1979. And there is no way they'll go back to it. So I think, one of the things that's been lacking, irrespective of the human rights and other problems within Iran, is a kind of respect for its, aspirations of being this regional leader, especially of the Shia community, and also of being a kind of a force for resistance against oppression and injustice. So the West, the elephant in the room is Israel, right? So the Israelis are very, very skeptical about Iran to the point where, they want the regime to fall. And even during Bush's time, the Israelis had asked and Bush had refused for an attack. And now, of course, they don't have as much sympathy in Washington as before. So they are desperate. And they have, in fact, if you see after Rouhani's election, the Israelis said nothing has changed. In fact, we want more pressure now. And in fact, one of the problems with the sanctions is that the sanctions are often being used to pacify Israel. They're saying we are doing something. Right. Don't attack them, we are doing something. Right. So what all this is adding up is to Iran, in a way, bracing for a permanent battle against what they see as Western hegemony. I was in Iran last year where everybody from Velayati to Rafsanjani, everyone was talking about the hegemonic power. We will oppose the hegemonic power. They're always talking about it. And even the lay people, they may have problems with the misgovernance of their rulers. But at the end of the day, opposing Western hegemony is almost in the DNA.
But does it follow from that the almost flamboyant confrontational attitude that we had seen during the reign of Ahmadinejad, he had formed that very attractive front against US along with Hugo Chavez. Is that likely to continue, or will definitely be tempered down, won't it be?
No, I don't think so. You see, if you look at China, Venezuela, Russia, all of them, definitely have not only congratulated, but they have said that, we are willing to continue this. So, if you see this as hyphenated to the West, I don't think Iran is going to, in any way, distance itself from these anti-Western actors. Okay. Because the more it does so, the more the isolation, in the Israelis will say, let's now go for the kill. They are not even, China and Russia are supporting them. So I think they'll continue to build those ties. What they want to do is to try and send a message that, where we can give something, you will also have to give back something. You cannot just extract unilaterally from us. Okay. That's the Iranian message.
Okay. Sreeram, the future of ties between India and Iran under Rouhani?
I think we are making some good moves, especially to expand the non-oil bilateral trade. There was a setback last year because we couldn't find insurers, and I think from 15 billion it came down to 10 billion. But the latest is the two governments have sworn to try and raise it up to 25 billion in the next 3 to 4 years. That will be a good volume of bilateral trade to sustain the relationship. The only problem has been the payments and the insurance. And we have not totally buckled down to Western pressure. We are dealing through UCO Bank and all these which don't have dollar connections. And we are doing the barter trade that Ambassador mentioned. So I think we'll have to continue doing this. 2014 onwards, of course, I think we should have a regular security dialogue with Iran and with the Russians and the Chinese about the post-withdrawal situation in Afghanistan. The western parts of Afghanistan which border Iran, especially Herat and these kind of provinces, are so critical in the long run for stability in our own region. So Iran will continue to do this, and there's no question. We have shown our independence to the West on this issue. Yeah. We have never buckled under that, and we'll continue to think about our own interests on this issue. And I think wherever possible, we will need to bring in Iran as part of the regional solution to many of the security dilemmas and spirals that have been going out of control in our neighborhood. So to that extent, I'm pretty hopeful. And as far as Iran's relationship with the West goes, and where India comes in, I think we will have to see ourselves as also impacted by this whole crisis, in the sense that the more the Western sanctions grow on Iran, the more because we have taken a stand that we are not in favor of a nuclear Iran either, right? So all these things will come into play, and we'll circumscribe our choices. They've already done so in the past, but we need to be resolute on this question. There have been instances in the past where, at IAEA and so on, we have, succumbed. But this time, I think we have to look at, there's no justification. Even the Israelis, because the Israelis have been saying, look at this president of this country. He says he'll wipe us out of the map. Why should we not oppose them? Now you don't have a president who is going to say that. So why do you want to continue this hostility? I think we should push for, as in fact Iran has now, I think, recently taken over the one of the UN bodies, and I think in the Conference of Disarmament, India has supported Iran's candidature to be the president, to hold the chair of this. In North Korea has held it in the past. The West is saying it's a joke. How can a nuclear proliferator be heading the Conference of Disarmament? But we have said there's no proof of this. That's the official line. Nobody has proof of Iran being a proliferator. So what we need to do...
Technically what they said was, a country against whom there are sanctions cannot be the chair.
Right.
And the position we took, along with lots of others, that is not a precondition for chairmanship. It continues to be a member. So we continue to support.
Israel is a violator of many UN Security Council resolutions. It sits on all kinds of committees. So the point is that we are backing the Iranians to the extent where our choices have some, we have some autonomy. But where it comes to for example, continuing to buy oil. The Chinese are the only ones who have increased oil purchase from Iran in the last 3-4 months. Everybody else, the other customers like South Korea, Japan, India have decreased. But at the end of the day, Iran still remains among our top 4 suppliers, and we will have to stick to that.
Okay. We'll keep all the options open as well, because oil dependence, or rather, it depends on import.
That's our second largest oil supplier now.
Right, and our dependence is not likely to go down anytime in the near future. Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for in this discussion. Ambassador Swashpawan Singh, Sreeram Chaulia, Zakir Hussain, thank you so much for your time. That's all we have for you in this edition of Insight. Thank you so much for watching us, and do stay tuned to Lok Sabha Television for more. Namaskar.